Okay, well, thank you, Rachel and Tamlin. My name is Sarah Smith. I'm a sophomore at College of the Ozarks, and I am studying nursing. Raise that up a little bit. As a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, I actually had the privilege to testify in the Missouri State Senate this past year for the Save Women's Sports Act. So what Riley is about to speak about comes close to home for me. It is my honor to introduce Riley Gaines. Riley recently graduated from University of Kentucky, where she was a 12-time All-American swimmer. This year, Riley competed and tied with swimmer Leah Thomas, a biological male at the NCAA championships. Riley has experienced firsthand the injustice and inequity that is a result of allowing males to compete in female sports. Riley has been outspoken on why this issue is a fundamental, unfair, and harmful thing towards women. And we are excited to hear from her today. Please help me welcome Riley Gaines.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see all you young and smiling faces, and it's especially just so special to hear from someone like Sarah, who is so young, but doing something that is so important and so needed in our society. Just a year ago, I can't even have fathomed that we would be here and have someone her age testifying against men being in women's sports, but that's where we're at. I know it's the end of the session and you guys are probably sick of being talked to. I know I would probably be. Actually, that's not true. You guys have been extremely interesting. It is. There's so many eye-opening pieces, especially to what you guys said. I'm thinking about my communication skills, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm failing. This is scary. But to be serious, it was not long ago that I was in y'all's seat, and I know all the tricks of hiding your phone under your table and acting like you're paying attention. But hopefully, I provide enough information that's useful and interesting to keep you guys thinking. As Sarah said, my name is Riley Gaines, and I just recently graduated from the University of Kentucky. My degree was in human health sciences and health advocacy, so nothing of any sort of political background or communications or journalism or anything that would have equipped me to be here or doing what I've been doing. I was actually set to go to dental school this year to pursue endodontics, which is basically dealing with all the nerves and the roots of your teeth. But I decided to put that on hold for this next year because I realized dental school will always be there, but the relevancy and importance in my platform might not be. So I've thrown a total wrench at my life plans, but I'm hoping that it's for the good. If I were to disregard that, I would be doing a disservice to not only just myself, but past, present, and future female athletes as well. But has anyone heard of the golden circle theory? It's basically a model that follows your outlines of your what and your how and your why. And so that's kind of the route I'm going to take my speech today. Your what is essentially what you're doing. In business terms, this would be like your product. Your how is the steps you're taking to get there and the steps you continue to do to produce your what. And your why is, of course, your purpose or your cause or your belief. It's the very reason why you're doing what you're doing. So I'll start by explaining my what to you guys. As Sarah said, I was a swimmer at the University of Kentucky. I was able to finish my career as a 5-time SEC champion. Actually an SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, which explains like the massive shoulders that I'm like trying to hide with my hair. But also a 12-time NCAA All-American and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. But all of that to say that being successful at such an elite level is far from easy, and it's a lifelong commitment. It's impossible to put into words the amount of time and sacrifices and effort that it takes. But I'm sure you guys get that. I'm sure you guys played sports. I talked to someone who was a swimmer earlier. Where is she? Yes. So y'all played sports, I'm sure. You get it. It's a lot. It's not easy. But I started swimming on my little summer league team at the age of 4. My summer league coach then convinced me to start doing year-round at age 8, so this meant that in 2nd grade, I was spending 2 hours in the water every single day, and it really only got worse from there. I say worse, I mean harder. So by the time I got to middle school, I was waking up at 4:45 every day to go practice before school because one practice just wasn't enough. You train all summer, you miss your Christmas breaks, you're traveling during your spring breaks to go to these high-level national meets, you miss out on vacations and sleepovers and all the fun things you look forward to in middle school and high school. My days essentially consisted of waking up, going to practice, then going to school, going back to practice for another 2 hours, going home to eat my dinner and do my homework and ice my shoulders or whatever injury I might have, and then going to bed and waking up and doing it all again the next day because that's what you do when you want to compete at the best you can against the fastest people in the world. And that was my dream, and I eventually committed to the University of Kentucky where I knew I could fulfill that dream. I had an okay freshman year, nothing super crazy, but I knew I was capable of more, and so I set big goals my sophomore year. But then, of course, COVID hit, which I'm sure you guys obviously are familiar with, and it threw a wrench at that. It was about 2 days before we left for our national championship meet my sophomore year before it got canceled. So we essentially felt like you train all year for something for no reason at all. We were sent home for a couple months, which in swimming, that's not a thing. We get a week off in August every year, but you never have a month's off. So it was the most bizarre experience for sure. But because every single pool was shut down, and I'm fortunate enough, I come from Nashville, Tennessee, where there's lots of lakes. I put a wetsuit on every day and I got in the lake and swam because this was my only option really to continue improving and working towards my goals. And eventually we were able to come back to campus and I was in a good position to be the fastest 200 freestyler in the country, which I then made it my goal to do that and to win a national title. So in November of last year, which was my senior year, November's about the middle of our season. It looked like I was going to get my chance. I was ranked 3rd in the nation behind one amazing female athlete that I was very familiar with because like in most sports, your top athletes know each other. I feel like regardless of where you're competing in the country, if you're at a high level, you know each other's names if you don't know each other personally. But the person who was ranked 1st by seconds, and swimming, seconds is a lot. This is a sport measured down to the 100th. And so this person who was ranked 1st, I had never heard of before, which if you're just looking at this on paper, it seems like it's this girl who came out of nowhere their senior year to post the fastest time in multiple events out of UPenn, which isn't a historically fast swimming school. So it just kind of makes you scratch your head like, this is bizarre. But honestly, I didn't think too much about it at the time. I just wanted to keep focusing on myself and training to do everything that I could. But then a couple days after Leah posted these times, there was an article posted disclosing that Leah Thomas was in fact formerly Will Thomas, who swam 3 years on the men's team at UPenn. And I was shocked when I found this out because the swimming community, especially at the NCAA level, had never really seen something like this. But truthfully, I was relieved because I thought to myself, there's no way the NCAA will let this person swim against us when it comes time to have our NCAA championships. If you're looking at this is a person who not even a year ago as a male was ranked in the 500s and 600s, and then now is beating every female in the country by seconds. The facts are right there. Logistically, everyone can see this and realize this is wrong and blatantly obvious at that. But I was clearly proven very wrong. About 3 weeks before our NCAA championships, the NCAA announced that Thomas would be competing with the females. And I got to personally witness and feel the effect that this infringement had on myself and the other female athletes at that meet. It's impossible to speak for everyone in that pool deck, but I can attest to the amount of tears that were shed by those poor 9th and 17th place finishers who missed out on being named an All-American by 1 place. And I can attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room when you turn around and there's a 6'4" biological man with male parts watching you undress. And I can attest to just the talks and grumbles of anger and frustration from these poor girls who had dedicated their whole lives to get to that moment. But what could we do about it? No one was really listening to us, and quite frankly, no one was really talking. We were talking amongst ourselves, but we didn't know who to talk to. But that first day, we watched Leah Thomas win a national title in the 500 freestyle. Like I said, beating Olympians, American record holders, the fastest American females in history out by a huge margin. And that next day, after Thomas won the national title, Thomas and I competed against each other in the 200 freestyle. And somehow we tied, which in swimming, it's relatively rare to go the exact same time down to the 100th. But of course we did. And looking back, this is 100% a God thing, how this whole thing presented itself. But we tied, and we go behind the awards podium, and the NCAA official looks at me and says, "Great job. We don't really account for ties in terms of trophies, so we're going to give Thomas the trophy. Yours will come in the mail eventually, but you will leave here with no trophy, and Thomas will take it home." And so I look at him, and I'm like, okay, I understand you don't account for ties, but can I ask you why you're adamant on giving this trophy to Thomas, especially as this person won a national title last night? And he looks at me and says, "Well, we're just doing this in chronological order." And so I realize at this point what's happening, and I say, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? And really, I'm mouthing off more than I'm letting out here. Leah is like from me to like this chair apart, and I'm blatantly calling this person a biological man. But I think rightfully so. But I asked him, what are you being chronological about? He says, "Well, for photo purposes, Thomas has to hold the trophy. Yours will come in the mail. You can pose with this one, but you'll have to give it back." And so it was kind of at this point that I was done waiting for someone to stick up for us. But I thought to myself, maybe I was trying to give the NCAA, which this is crazy, some sort of benefit of the doubt here. I started looking into the rules that were put in place that allowed this to happen, and they were made 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And so I was trying to rationalize and thought, okay, maybe this was just sprung upon them, and they didn't have time to adequately look at the science we've developed in these past 10 years to rewrite these rules. Maybe this is a fluke thing and it won't happen again. But then, a couple months after this, the NCAA, I actually got a letter from the NCAA saying, "Congratulations, you've been nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year," which is the highest honor for all of female athletes in all of college sports. So I was thrilled to get this nomination. But then a couple weeks after I received the application to submit your nomination, they posted a list of all the nominees. And you bet your bottom dollar, I saw Leah Thomas on that name of lists of 2022 NCAA Woman of the Year. And so I realized how stupid I was for trying to give the NCAA grace in the first place, because not only at this point was this just a fluke thing that happened, this is something that they're encouraging. They're saying this person who didn't even spend 5% of their life as a female is the best female to come out of UPenn, which is crazy. So I know that's a lot of rambling to kind of get to what my what is. So in short, my what and what I want to accomplish is to make sure that there's a change that ensures that no female athlete, or no female in general, has to worry about not being entitled to fair competition or privacy in an area meant for undressing or safety in their sport. And the sad thing is, when you say it like that, it almost seems like the bare minimum. But now for my how. So how was I going to achieve that? And this was something I struggled with for a while. I prayed and I prayed, and I still continue to pray for answers of how to go about this, because it's hard to navigate this whole overwhelming process, and it's hard to know the most effective way to make a change on either a state or a federal level, especially when you have people in the White House who are actively trying to do the opposite of what you're doing. The Biden administration has proposed a rewrite of Title IX that equates sex with gender identity. This erases all sex-based categories and all sex-based protections for women in universities and college campuses. It mandates women accept males in our locker room and in our dorm rooms. Title IX has now declared that if you get assigned a roommate who is transgender and you feel uncomfortable about it, you're committing sexual harassment. Males now have access to our sports and our scholarships and our awards, but not just in sports and academics as well. It mandates that males can demand the words by which we address them. Or, like I said, we're guilty of sexual harassment. If you use the wrong pronouns, sexual harassment, but not the 6'4" biological male that I saw with male genitalia staring at us while we're undressing in the locker room, that is not sexual harassment. But if I were to refer to Leah Thomas as a he, that is. So just keep that in mind. But like I said, for the longest time, I waited for someone to speak up for us, whether it had been a coach or someone within the NCAA or someone with some sort of political power. But that's not what we were seeing. But then it kind of hit me, and this is what encouraged me to speak out initially. How could we as women expect someone else to stick up for ourselves if we weren't willing to stick up for ourselves? And I knew I had this sort of powerful testimony that no one really knew of in referring to the trophy incident. I feel like that presented itself in such a powerful way. And I knew I had a platform as a pretty successful athlete, but I didn't know which route to take until the Daily Wire reached out to me. They were, I think, a lot of conservative outlets were at the meet. They were reluctantly reaching out to people on Instagram, DMs, hoping to get someone to say anything, but everyone was so scared. It was the craziest thing. We talked about it amongst ourselves in whispers, but that was it. But then they reached out to me after seeing that we tied, and I hesitantly agreed. You guys might have seen the picture of me and Leah Thomas, actually. We're standing on the podium together. I'm like side-eyeing Thomas, and I think you could effectively put a thought bubble over my head and probably predict exactly what I was thinking. But this Daily Wire story blew up. And I think it blew up for a couple reasons. One, who doesn't love sports? Sports is something that resonates with really everyone. I think even with it being women's sports, I think people feel passionately about being able to engage in athletics and what that does for you as you continue on your career. Sports provides so many lifelong developmental skills. But I also think it blew up because people had no idea the severity of what was happening to female athletes and what we were dealing with, because the media up until this point had totally tried to sweep this under the rug. But it was at this point too that I realized, and I think the public realized, that not only were we being forced to compete against men and forced to change in a locker room with men, I think the trophy story kind of showed the public that we were being sidelined to men as females. We were being put on the back burner. And so they saw this story, and I think they knew how utterly unfair that it was and how blatantly obvious it was that men are just inherently stronger and more powerful and have more endurance, and all of these things faster, obviously taller than females when it comes to sports. And to deny that denies logic and reason and science and, quite frankly, common sense. But that Daily Wire story then turned into Fox News hits. I think I've been on Tucker Carlson about 10 times at this point. I just went to his house for a little bit. And then speaking at CPAC with President Trump. And then it turned into going on different campaign races with these amazing people who are willing to fight for what it means to be a female, especially in sports. But I felt like I was using my voice to shed a light on what was happening, but I didn't feel like any change was being made. I felt like by going on Fox News and doing all these things, I was in some way kind of preaching to the choir. These people agree with me. They know this is crazy, but how do I convince the people who don't know this is crazy that this is crazy? I wanted more, and so I was still seeing all these similar stories of mine across the country that are happening at a rampant rate. And so I got involved in the legislature side of things, and the policy side of things. I have testified, like Sarah has, in many Senate chambers for different states when they're passing their fairness in women's sports bills. I actually just created a federal PAC called 9PAC, and a PAC is a political action committee. And we are dedicated to endorsing candidates who are willing to fight for Title IX and to restore Title IX, regardless of which party they are, I might add. It doesn't matter to me, their party affiliation. Of course, it has only really been one way thus far, but I am willing to advocate for anyone who's willing to advocate for me and my fellow female athletes and other girls around the country. And while, of course, this problem is nowhere near being resolved, there have been some positive changes that have been made. I think there's over 20-something states now that have passed a fairness in women's sports bill, keeping transgender athletes from competing in the category that doesn't match their sex. FINA, which is the World's Organization for International Swimming, has voted to restrict transgender athletes from competing at an elite level, which includes the Olympics, which is a blessing because, of course, Leah Thomas came out and said that they wanted to compete on the females Olympic team, which, of course, we only take 2 athletes per event. So I think for Thomas to come out and say they want to take one of those 2 spots shows the true self-centeredness and the arrogance and the utter disregard for women that this person has. But like I said, there's still a lot of work to be done across all sports. It's not just swimming that I'm dedicated to fighting. I don't think any female should have to compare themselves to a man physically. But I realize this, of course, can't happen overnight, and I'm totally appreciating the little steps that it's taking to get to the bigger picture. But now for my why. Why does this matter so much? And why am I here talking to you guys, and why have I been doing what I've been doing, and why will I continue doing what I've been doing? And that's because this matters. Women deserve to be recognized, and women should not ever have to face blatant discrimination. We deserve to achieve, and we deserve fair competition. We do not need to give up our consent in places where we undress, and we do not need to give up the awards we have earned simply to validate men and make them feel better. There is no equity, and there is no fairness, and there is no sportsmanship, and there is no opportunities for women to succeed at an elite level without sex-based categories. And I think it's crucial that we, as a society, open our eyes to the irrefutable damage that's being done, not just to Title IX. This is something that's happening across a bigger aspect than just sports. Look at schools. There's so many different pieces of this now that I'm realizing by us not acknowledging what a woman is and the rights that they deserve, we're doing such harm, and it's irrefutable. This is actually the 50th anniversary of Title IX. It was signed into effect by, I think, President Richard Nixon in the 70s, I think. Don't fact check me. But I'm sure you've all heard of what Title IX is, but quite plainly, it's a federal civil rights law that protects people from sex-based discrimination on college campuses. In sports, it made it illegal for any public institution to limit participation in sports based on a person's sex, meaning women would be provided equal opportunities as men. And this changed the athletic world and really lives of women across the country. But it wasn't an easy change. For centuries, women have fought relentlessly to get here, which is something I definitely took for granted. I think these minority groups, like the transgender community, that we're catering to, that are oppressed, forget that women are historically oppressed, and not that long ago. This isn't only 50 years ago. And that I think we look at this, or really the left looks at this as progressive. We're moving forward. But allowing men to compete with women is not moving forward. We're going 50 years plus backwards. This is regressive. This is not something that's taking us in the forward direction. And so that's one of my whys, is for the past female athletes who fought to get equal opportunities. But what about this next generation of athletes? These young girls who don't yet understand the implications of allowing men to compete in women's sports and what that means for them and their chances for success, and really their chances to achieve. That's another one of my whys. They can't fight for themselves yet, and they need strong, courageous people like you guys to kind of pave the way for them. So the younger generation is another one. And of course, the present female athletes who are intimidated and emotionally blackmailed and threatened into silence. I've been talking with different girls around the NCAA, and the stories they tell me that their universities have told them, it is wild. So not only is this just an infringement on sports, this is a freedom of speech issue for sure. These poor girls on Leah Thomas's team, actually, I've had all of her teammates reach out to me and say, thank you for what you're doing, because we deal with this every day and you have no idea how hard it is. But the Ivy League sent an email to their swimmers saying, if you guys feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia in your locker room, here are some counseling resources that you should seek. And they referred them to the LGBTQ Education Center to educate themselves on what these transgender people are dealing with. So these girls are thought to be crazy for not wanting to have to see male parts or have a male look at them when they undress. They're told their schools have made their stances for them, and if they choose to speak another stance and any harm comes to that transgender athlete's way, then they are solely responsible. So then these girls are left feeling like they're responsible for someone else's harm because they feel uncomfortable changing in a locker room. They don't feel like it's right to compete against them. It's a trend around this country to see this silencing. But I was actually fortunate enough at the University of Kentucky where I did not have that. And I'm realizing that is totally an anomaly. And also why I say this is a God thing. Me even going to the University of Kentucky, I have not heard of another school with an athletic department encouraging their athletes to use their voice like Kentucky has. I think this speaks volumes on my university and really the Southeastern Conference, especially in comparison with the Ivy League. They tell their girls they'll never get a job. You'll never get into grad school. All of these things, they'll lose their scholarship if they speak out. It's crazy. But the Ivy League and the NCAA are just two of so many examples of organizations finding it easier to cave into the demands of today's woke fad than to stand up for what's moral and what's right. I want to paraphrase a quote from triathlon national champion. Her name is Lauren Bonley, who explained why this matters, her why. She says, this fight is about whether women deserve to be treated fairly or not, because if we don't deserve to be treated fairly, even in the one place where fairness is supposed to be ensured and upheld, what hope do we have everywhere else where women are being treated poorly? Forcing the majority to abandon their rights in favor of the minority is simply wrong. And so before I finish my speech, I want to take Rachel's advice and give you guys a couple of examples of this affecting girls around the country. So you don't believe the narrative that, oh, well, this is a non-issue, this isn't really happening, or it's only happening to a handful of girls, it doesn't really matter. First of all, a handful of girls is a handful too many. One girl this happening to is one too many. But there was a young girl, she's actually 14 years old, she's from Vermont, who plays volleyball. 14 years old, they have a transgender on the other team. And so they all go in the locker room, and this person, this transgender, sits on the bleachers, or sits on the little bench in the locker room and just watches them undress. Doesn't change their clothes, and starts making inappropriate comments. And so this young 14-year-old, freshman in high school, walks out and tells the administrator, like, hey, we all feel uncomfortable in there. So what did they do? They kicked all the girls out of the locker room and told them to go change in single stall locker rooms so that the transgender could stay in the with. That girl then went on to speak out at a different media outlet, and her dad lost his job for speaking out, for his daughter speaking out and misgendering this person. There was an instance a couple weeks ago, I think it's about a month and a half ago, in North Carolina with volleyball, which I want to add, men's volleyball, the net is 7 inches higher, which that right there is acknowledging there's difference between men and women. But whatever, there's a man who's competing on the women's team who, you guys might have seen the video. He spikes this ball into this girl's face, and a month later, she's still having vision problems because where she's dealing with neurological issues because she had a concussion, and she's still having problems. There's a girl out of Utah, I believe. Her name is Madison. She's awesome. She was telling me she was at her state track meet in high school, her senior year, and they're running a relay. And her relay's in the lead. It's about to go to the anchor. It's relatively close, but the team they're competing against has a male anchoring for their women's relay and takes off and, of course, passes Madison's team. And Madison said she could hear the coach to the transgender athlete yelling, slow down, make it look believable. What a mockery of everything that we're capable of as females, to have a coach telling their male athlete, to slow down to make it look like a fair race. And then just the other day in disc golf, which I know it's disc golf, and I don't know really anything about disc golf in general, but the principle. There's a man who's competing in the females category, which they have a mixed category. They had an open category available, but this person said, no, I don't want to compete in the open category. I want to compete with the females, and won $27,000 in prize money that should have gone to a female who earned it. So it's not only at this point are we losing out on scholarships and titles and opportunities, these people are losing out on prize money. But anyways, just a couple examples for you guys. But I want to end my speech with kind of a call to action. We need females, both old and young, across all sports to defend their rights to equal opportunity. And I want to give you guys some ways to help out. First and foremost, I know we've said it a couple times today, but it's so important to vote for people who will make a difference. If you're all of age, there might be some young ones in the room, but if you're all of age, we should definitely exercise our constitutional right to vote for who you think as an American will be representative of our democracy. Do your research. It's really important. And vote for the people who just have your best interests and our best interests and good intentions, true intentions, because that's hard to find in politics. But secondly, you guys can go to Icons. It's actually called iconswomens.com. ICON stands for Independent Council on Women's Sports, and it's an organization founded by a former NCAA champion. She's in her 30s, I believe, but she swam actually at the University of Arizona, and she won a national title a long time ago. And another NCAA All-American former athlete who played tennis at Stanford, but she actually had a daughter who competed against Leah Thomas this year. But they have, on their website, they have resources and links and webinars and all of these incredibly awesome things that just keep you informed. They have videos to science, all the science aspects of it, which I could go into, but I don't want to bore you guys. I know you said use your numbers, but I won't do that to you guys. But they have the data there, and it's obvious, like I've said. But they constantly post breaking stories, and so I find myself, before my Twitter got banned, always on their account looking at the newest and latest issues regarding this topic. And they also, if you're willing and able to donate, they use that money to further fund people for different lawsuits and things like that. But lastly, I want to say to use your voice. I understand it is totally scary, and you don't want to be labeled as transphobic or a bigot or hateful or all these crazy things, but Does acknowledging that a woman deserves a protected class and equal opportunities make you those things? Because if so, I guess I'm a hateful transphobic bigot. But you know the saying, there's nothing to fear except fear itself. So, and that's true. Speaking up and realizing that there's nothing to be afraid of is liberating. It's empowering, and it's kind of freeing to speak the truth. And it's not too difficult. People are drawn to it, and they're drawn to that courage. It's not hard to say, women deserve respect. There are two sexes, and you can't change your sex. And of course, I've received some flack. But I will say, I've received tenfold support to anything negative. Globally, not just locally in my community. It's been people across the world thanking me for speaking out because they can't. They feel as if they're in a position that they can't, or they have young daughters and all these things. But like I said, I just got my Twitter account banned, which I kind of feel like it's an achievement. I feel like I did something good if you get your Twitter account banned. But they said my Twitter account got banned because in my bio, it said I was born in 1998 because I guess I created my account before I was eligible of age. And I guess someone found out I was really born in 2000 and reported me for lying about my birthday, which is stupid, so whatever. But I think it's important that we stop being the silent majority and turn into the vocal majority, because I can tell you, based off the comments and feedback I've gotten, it is the vocal majority. That's how we make a change. I think the next generation is depending on us to use our voices. And we need to find how to use it, and we need to do it now and every chance that we have. And one last thing I recommend doing is just praying. It's been crucial for me because it is scary. And if there's one thing I've always wanted to do, it's live a Christ-like life. I think that should be at the forefront of all of your decisions and your actions. And so it's like you're walking on a weird line of being hateful, but acknowledging truth, but also just stating facts. So it's hard, but praying has helped me a ton. But I appreciate you guys listening to me and not like falling asleep. I don't think there's any like head bobs back like I probably would have been doing. But like I said, I could talk about this for hours. I could just go on and on. So if you have any questions, I would love to hear.
Thank you so much for your talk. It was really great to hear it. I'm a 2000 baby as well.
Awesome.
It's awesome to hear how much you've done, honestly, with all of this. But I wanted to just see if you could further elaborate on, especially your last comments, just speaking out, especially on this issue, in a world that doesn't recognize objective truth. How do you keep up your courage day to day?
I'm someone who's good at looking at perspective. And so these people who I found they can really only say like 3 things about me. And one is either you're transphobic, which like, that is so stupid. 2, you're bad at swimming, which I'm also kind of like, I don't know if that's true. Maybe now that I'm like retired and like whatever, maybe, but I think that's stupid too. You get a lot of just do better. You should have just done better. Okay, good one. I would never thought of that. Or you're ugly. So I'm realizing it's a lot of like personal attacks. But I find myself clicking on the profiles of these people calling me these things, and they either have no profile picture, they're like morbidly obese and have probably never played a sport in their entire life, or they're transgender themselves. And so I'm realizing that that's not representative of the majority of our population. Those people saying these things about me are probably just incredibly insecure with themselves. And so I've had to really work to develop a sense of security, because it is hard at first, because while there is a lot more support, it seems as if the negative comments weigh more. But I've realized what I'm saying, it's not even opinions. What I'm saying is facts. And so I know that I have a rebuttal for essentially anything anyone could throw at me. And I because this topic is so obvious. And so I think there's certain phrases and certain things that can be put out on social media that are irrefutable and that cannot be labeled as anything, because it's nothing other than statistics and proven facts that cannot be broken down into labeling you as transphobic. And if these people so choose to do that, then it's over their head and they're past the point of remotely even trying to come from a sense of acknowledgement, if that makes sense. But I've definitely had to learn perspective. I hope that answered.
Thank you so much for your talk. I'm not a sports person, but I'm totally sympathetic to this entire cause. I want you to also know I have a professor who's a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and he has a young daughter. And in front of his very liberal class, he agreed with your position about women in biological men in women's sports. So it's not just the right that believes in you. So I'd like you to know.
Well, I've realized that is there's this huge animosity towards the transgender community right now. So it seems, even within the LGBT whatever, because these transgender individuals, and I can't speak for all of them, and I don't want to speak for all of them, but a pattern I'm noticing is they get mad if lesbians don't want to date a transgender male to female, because technically they're female, but a lesbian is like, well, that's not what I'm attracted in. Oh, well, you're transphobic. And so I'm seeing a lot of trends going along with the hashtag LGBTQ. They're leaving out the T. But you're so right, this is a nonpartisan issue. And I think the piece about the daughters, if there's anything that adults with kids want to protect, it's their children, regardless of which side you're on in this. And so I've definitely realized that parents want to shelter their kids from that, and rightfully so. You hear instances of, even at the YMCA and Planet Fitness and all these places, of men changing in a locker room with young girls. That's not okay. A year ago, that guy would have been arrested, but that's not what we're seeing now. And I think we're reaching a tipping point as a society, which is hopeful. And I'm very excited to see how things pan out on Tuesday, to hopefully restore some balance, because we have I think every election cycle, it kind of goes, you elect a party into office and they tip the needle until it's too far radical and we restore it. And I truly hope we're restoring the needle, because if we're not at this point, I don't know what's too far radical. But thank you.
Yeah, of course. And also, I had a question about, I know another activist that was a former athlete who's been speaking out about this issue. And her kind of solution, for lack of a better term, is to add what we call the open categories for transgender athletes. Because we're seeing an increase of transgender children, regardless of our opinions of that. That's what's actually happening. So is that a viable solution in your mind, or what would that be?
I do think in individual type sports like swimming or track, or something where you're on a team but you're competing for yourself, I think a third category, while it might not be the most fiscal in terms of financially funding or having a ton of participation, because there aren't a ton of people represented in that community, I do think it is a way to ensure athletic opportunity. It's a way to ensure athletic success, and it's a way to keep the playing field fair for everyone. And so I think it's probably not the most viable option. I do think with some more research into what it looks like getting to that point, I do think that's a way to ensure all those things. I also think rather than having a women's men's open, why not just have the men's category be an open type category? Because these men, they're already, these people that are threatening the women's category aren't threatening the men's category. And so I think that's a way to ensure everyone the same things. And I also want to add that at our NCAA championship meet, we also had another transgender athlete there, whose name was Isaac, who was formerly Izzy, who was transitioning from female to male, but of course went by he, him, all the things, but swam with the girls. And so this just, to me, disproved any sort of allowing people to compete with their gender identity, because we had this girl who swam completely topless, might I add, competing with the women while identifying as a man, because this person would have never been able to compete with the men. Regardless of how much testosterone you're injecting, that person was miles off of competing with the men. And so I think that right there shows that the women's category is kind of the catch-all in a sense, and it's what's at jeopardy. And the media did a terrible job of covering that. They tried to kind of hide that under the rug so people in the public didn't know that we had both types of transitioning people in the females category. So, any more? I could talk about it forever. No, but I appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully it was insightful. So thank you guys, and thank Miss Clare back there for being so incredible, and Michelle and all of you guys, and Lindsay, Caroline, you guys have been incredible. Very easy communication and just awesome planning. This is incredible. It's so nice to see so many young people who have bright faces and are just encouraged. It's empowering, and it's encouraging, and it's inspiring to myself. So thank you guys. It's very appreciated.